have a dream, oh, I have a dream. Red, white, and blue, fly free, fly free. I believe, oh, I believe. Will you dream with me?
Welcome to Changing Times. This is Don Blacker. Thank you for joining us today. Lynn is away, and we wish him well today. He has been here for almost every single show of our 56 episodes, and today I am so honored, so excited to have such a phenomenal guest on the show today. So we have David Harrison today, and if you do not know that name, you're going to recognize it by the end. David Harrison is an award-winning children's author, a public speaker, and a poet. And we are so blessed because in the month of April is Poetry Month. So we're going to get to dive in and interview an amazing author who writes all kinds of poetry. He has written over 109 published books. So that is extraordinary. Thank you for coming on the show today, David.
Thank you, Don. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I said we're just going to have fun today. So in Springfield, Missouri, where our studio is located, Mr. Harrison has an elementary school named after him, which is Harrison Elementary School. And I think you know you've made it as a children's author when they've named an elementary school after you. How does that feel to have an elementary school named after you?
I can't drive by the school or go in it without just getting goosebumps. It's one of those things that will always, I'll always carry in my heart and be grateful for.
So when did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
I wrote my first poems just because kids do stuff when I was maybe 6, but I had no thought of becoming a writer until I was my senior year at Drury University. So I would have been 22, I guess, 21 or 2. And I was a science major. Everything I took was physics and biology and chemistry and geology. And Drury is a liberal arts college. You're supposed to come out of Drury with a well-rounded education. And I was apparently not following the rules. And so the dean of Drury called me into his office and gave me a hard time. Just as I was getting ready to register for my last semester. And he told me that I could take anything I wanted that last semester as long as it wasn't science. So I sort of blundered into some classes. One of them that I took because my advisor helped me, I learned later, was a writing class, the only one I'd ever had. And I was terrified. I didn't know how to write. I'd never even seen these students. They were always in their part of the campus, and I was always smelling like formaldehyde over on my side. And but by the end of the semester, I had written a story. The professor called me aside and told me that I should become a writer, that he thought I had a love of words and was having a good time playing with them. And he thought I would be a good writer. It took years after that, but that was the impetus. That's what started it, was when I was that age. And somebody else had to tell me that I should do it.
Wow. Well, big shout out to Drury University here in Springfield, Missouri, because it's a phenomenal university. That's where my brother went, and I'm sure they are just honored that you came out of there, graduated. So your first book, was that Boy with a Drum?
It was my first published book.
And that was in 1969, correct?
Correct.
And it sold over 2 million copies?
That also is correct.
Wow.
It helped me decide that maybe I should try that again.
Yes, that was a confidence booster right there.
Yeah, because I didn't start. When Dr. Graham suggested to me that I should become a writer, that's all he said. And the story that I had written was not for kids. I had no thought about writing for young people. I was going to be the next Updike, the next Hemingway. So I wrote for years for adults. And and had a modicum of success, enough to think maybe I could be a writer. But it still hadn't occurred to me that I might be a writer for young people.
Yes. So then your science background, would you show your current book, the Dirt Book? Because that has to have, your science is still banked in your head and that comes across in your writing.
Oh,
And you're
absolutely.
teaching kids to love science in a different way at a younger age. Would you show the audience that book and just kind of tell them about it? And
Yeah. This is the Dirt Book. And it's one of many books about science or science informed that I've done. And you're quite right. All those years of studying science, 2 degrees, I went on down to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia for my master's work, still in science. And so and then my first job was as a pharmacologist for Mead Johnson in Evansville, Indiana. And eventually I left the field and went into other kinds of work. But I've spent a lifetime pulling from what I learned in classes, plus observation and my own reading and research. And so this is typical, the Dirt Book. I decided that kids probably have very little idea of what's going on underground when they're walking across a yard or playing at school in a playground. There's plenty down below them. In the case of water, we can go down in the water, but we can't go down in the dirt. So that's why this Dirt Book. And shall I read a poem?
yes, I would love that.
Okay, I borrowed from Albert Einstein on this. When he was studying space, he imagined an elevator in space that he could be in, riding in space, fully equipped to do all of his scientific experiments. I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. If it worked for Dr. Einstein, it might work for me. So here is the elevator that takes the reader down into the dirt.
Absolutely gorgeous illustrations.
Oh, this woman is fantastic. This was about maybe her first or second book, other than something she had done for herself. She's a fine artist and does other kinds of artwork. And we've done 2 books together now. We're working on another one. So this way, the young reader can go down into the dirt. I was in a school here in Missouri, near Warrensburg, not long ago. And after I talked to a group of first graders, kindergarten, first, second graders, I think, and read some of these poems, then I took them outside. We all went outside and played in the dirt. And we gave everybody a pencil or a crayon or something and paper. And they made pictures of things they were seeing, scratching around roots and whatnot. And then we all came back inside and talked about what we'd seen. So that was kind of fun. I should be showing that, well, I mean, the artwork is just incredible. Here's a trapdoor spider.
Yes, yes.
But not everyone is into spiders, so I won't read that one. How about...
I like how the book is broken up into multiple poems.
Yeah, well, here's one. This is about ants. And ants are incredibly complicated. There are thousands of kinds of ants around the world. And what I find fascinating about them is how they function down there in the dark without a leader. They're a social group, and somehow or another they work together. So, ant, city builder. 1,000 ants without a sound build a city underground. Without light, they build halls. Down the city sprawls. Without rest, they tug and toil. grain by grain, remove soil. Without a leader, in the gloom they scoop and hollow out each room. Without tools, they clean and sweep and build their city strong and deep. How do they do that? I don't know. Anyway, I like to think about them down there.
Yes.
Now, I don't like them in my kitchen.
No.
They need to stay where they belong, not bother me. So that's, here's one about grubs and one about the mouse, bumblebee. Did you know that at the end of the year in a bumblebee colony, the queen bee, bumblebee, is the only one who survives. And she finds a nice place to snuggle in where she can make it through the winter so that in the spring she can start another colony. And so you might find her down there in the dirt during the cold months. Yellow jacket wasps, moles, a toad. About ground, here we go, toad, bedtime. Above ground, the leaves pile deep as toad begins to claw and creep down through the dirt to make a nest where it can take a winter rest. Time now for toad to sleep.
And these books are available probably here in Springfield at the local library. And they could get this book I've seen it on Amazon, probably Barnes and Noble.
Pretty much anywhere. And yeah, you can certainly order them on Amazon if you can't find them locally, but Barnes and Noble should have them. Pagination over on Walnut Street, the wonderful bookstore, should have copies, or they can all order them, of course.
And then we have your website there at the bottom of your name, so people can go there and learn more about you and learn more about your books as well, for davidlharrison.com.
Yeah, if you do, and I would appreciate it if you take a few minutes, tells you a lot more about me, but it also provides all the things that I've had published over the years.
Oh, it was very impressive. I really enjoyed looking at the picture of you surrounded by just this multitude of books.
Yeah, of course, I've been doing this for a long time now. So if you start with 1969, and since I wrote 10 years before that, I really started in 1959. So a little math, and you can see where I've been at it for a very long time. And I start each morning at 6 o'clock, and I work till 1 o'clock. So I made an exception today. Thank you very much for inviting me onto the show, because otherwise I would be home working. And on the way over here in the car, I was making up a poem and at stoplight scribbling the beginning of a poem about scorpions. I don't know why we have to have the scorpion. It's not much good for anything. All it does is fight and sting. I don't know why we have to have the scorpion. So that's something in progress.
Well, whenever you have inspiration, you've got to write it down when you get it. So
yep, absolutely.
And so that leads me to, I was going to ask, I'm a new author. I've written one book. And what advice would you give to an author? And I could already pick up on two things. One, when you have inspiration, you need to jot it down. And two, you already said you're disciplined with when you write.
I've always been disciplined about everything in my life. And busy. I can remember back in elementary school, I was always involved in something. So that just came with me, and I didn't develop it. It's just who I am. But over time, you go with your strength, and that's one of my strengths. So it has come in very handy. I'm very happy being alone. I have no problems in long silences. I'm in my head a lot, thinking my thoughts. Whatever else I'm doing, I'm probably still, one part of my brain is out there thinking about scorpions or something. And I know that if I don't show up for work at my desk, which is 23 steps from my bed, each morning, Monday through Friday, no one will care. except me. So my first concern is keeping me happy and fulfilling what I feel I need to do and want so much to do. If I quit, the world will pay very little attention to that. While I'm still making books, they bring pleasure to X number of people. And that, of course, is a goal. But this is all about you, the writer, doing what the writer wants to do and has to do or thinks he does. So therefore, if I want to get something done, nobody's going to tell me I have to except for me. And working 7 hours a day, 5 days a week is my compromise. I used to do 12 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
But my wife and I have been married a long time. We're lovers now as we were when we were kids. And she retired not so many years ago from Gamble's, a gift shop, a wonderful gift shop. And I had promised Sandy that once she retired, I would reduce my work day and stop at 1 o'clock so that she and I would have time together for the rest of the day. So I did that, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But I will say that when I was working longer hours, I was also happy. So I have a choice of being how I want to be happy.
Yeah, but you're consistent. So you're always writing. And like you said, yeah, even at the stoplight, you're not at your desk, but you're still writing.
Pretty much.
And we talked earlier about like, what does it take to be creative? You know, some people have it, some people don't. It's just that side of their brain. And I really liked what you said in the green room, that it's a muscle.
I think of it that way. The more you do something, the better. When I was 10 years old, my parents bought me a trombone. And naturally, I was a total beginner, and they arranged for me to have lessons. And my teacher said, practice 30 minutes a day. And that seemed like a long time. Within a few years, I was practicing 3 or 4 hours a day. I was principal trombonist in the Civic Symphony. I was giving lessons of my own. I played professionally, went on the road. Not on the road, but I played in another city in Illinois, actually. So the point there is that I started with nothing and made something happen because I kept at it. And I think that applies across the board. The more you practice, the more you do something, the better you become. And in the case of my writing, I certainly knew nothing about it. When I blundered into that class at Drury and took a course that required that I write something. And so I did, and it felt pretty good. I tried it again, and then after that, you can see over many, many, many years, I've continued to develop, and I'm still learning. I suppose doctors say they practice medicine, and lawyers say that they practice law. I guess writers should say the same thing. We practice writing.
Absolutely. Well, would you tell us about another one of your books? And then I'll ask you some more questions. You have so many phenomenal, gorgeous books over there. Which one would you like to share with the audience?
Well, here's a little bitty book called Bugs. And I challenged myself some years ago to see if I could write a book of poems that are very short, very brief. For example, here's A Tick's Friends. A tick has no friends, therefore my story ends.
That's amazing.
So that was kind of a fun thing to do. And this book came out many, many years ago, I think 2007 maybe, but it's still around. And last month in Dayton, Ohio, at a symphony concert, the Dayton Philharmonic Youth Orchestra, it featured this book. It was the Bugs concert. During the course of that concert, they featured me on a huge screen that went all the way across the back of the orchestra. It took up the entire wall. And I had videoed myself from Springfield reading a couple of poems, in this case with the pianist, the young woman who played the piano for the orchestra. And this is Poems for Two Voices, where I read part of it and she read part of it. So when I was doing the recording, I would read my voice, reading my part, and then pause, giving her time, and then we spliced it together that way. And it was just such a kick to see something like this being shown at an orchestra concert in Dayton, Ohio.
Well, I like the part of your story that you stumbled into your calling because you were on a different path. And and then someone decided to make you change it up.
Yeah, I was always a nature kid. From the time I picked up my first snake when I was 3, and my mother almost had a heart attack. That was a black snake, a rather large one. And we were some friends, and their dogs had caught a snake, and they were shaking it around and playing a game with it. Well, I thought that was fun, and I just got out there with them. And by the time the mothers caught me, I was just having a big time, and I had blood on me, but it was not my blood. From then forward, I was always crawling around catching things. Sorry. So by the time I got to school age, I already had a habit of being outside as much as I could, and then it just never stopped. So I reached college age, and that dictated what my major should be. It should be in biology, zoology. I never was as big on plants as I was on animals, but now I wish I'd paid more attention to plants too. Anyway, that's why I wound up in science. And I already had a lifetime of love and interest invested in that. And I still do. I spend an awful lot of time outside observing. So now that I am no longer in science, it doesn't mean that I can't continue to use my love for science and what I learned at Drury and later on at Emory University in Atlanta. And that informs a lot of my books. I really kind of hate to say this, but I'm probably more comfortable writing about animals than I am writing about kids. I can do more with animals. There are fewer things that I have to worry about or be concerned about or be careful about writing about animals. And so it comes naturally, and I do it okay, and so I keep doing it.
That's phenomenal. So you have more books coming. I'm sure you've got just so many in the works at the same time. You know, do you work on one book at a time, or do you work on multiple books at a time?
No, thank you for asking. I work on several books at a time, and this one just came out, and it's one of, I think this is my 20th or so book for teachers. I started doing this to share what I know with teachers so they can share it with their kids. 1999, I think, was the first one that came out. And this is an example of how I write for the very young. This is kindergarten through second grade. Now, when I'm doing something like this, I'm not a teacher. I don't have any teaching credentials. I've never taken a class in my life. But I've learned a lot over the years, not enough to try to palm myself off as a teacher. That's a very, very special kind of profession. And I have nothing but love and admiration and appreciation for teachers. But I can buddy up with people. So in this case, this is Tim Rosinski is a professor at Kent State, and Mary Jo Fresh is a professor emeritus at The Ohio State. And the three of us have written several books together. And so while I'm working on Well, when I finish my part, which comes first, writing the poems, and then the other two are doing what they do, I'm turning to something else. And if it takes me weeks to finish the next book or next whatever project, then I finish and send that on to an editor. Well, an editor could take months to respond. I have a manuscript right now with the editor at this publisher, this Holiday House, and she's had the manuscript, and she says she loves it since 2019.
Oh,
But
wow.
still no, she's promised to try to get to it by the end of this month, and we're about to run out of month. But with these large publishers, like Scholastic has something like 12,000 employees and $3 billion company, you have to expect a lot of moving parts, and so they don't get in a big hurry. But in the end, they make good books. So I may have 3 or 4 or 5 books in various stages. While I'm waiting for this to happen, I start something else.
I like to say that with the creatives for myself, it's like playing hot potato.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the potato and then you pass it on and then you're going to get it back and you pass it on again. And
That's right.
I think that's the key to learning how to juggle and just keep moving forward with all the other creative projects that take place.
Sure. Yeah.
So why poetry? I mean, I think it brings the book more to life and I think it engages the children more, but why did you choose poetry?
Well, of the 100-some books, I've done probably 40 are stories, and another 25 maybe are nonfiction, and another 25 or so of poetry. I don't know how it all breaks down, but poetry is only one of the things that I do. One of the ways I write. I write, number one, poetry is my favorite, and I write poetry because I like it. I write poetry because I work with young people, and it's a good learning device, a good learning tool for boys and girls. It's a mnemonic. It's easier to remember something in rhyme, something in meter, than it is to remember anything else. So poetry is structured language, and especially when I write for kids like this, for teachers, to work with their young people, it's simply easier for them to learn to read, to appreciate reading, and to become independent readers when they have at least a healthy part of their diet in lines that rhyme and have meter.
Absolutely. Well, I want to let the audience know that at the bottom of the screen, we're rolling our sponsors, and we could not do this show without them, Brad Pistow and Youngblood Auto Group. So we thank them so much. You can just see that going across the screen right now at the bottom. And we're just going to keep continuing to talk about the love of literacy and poetry. And again, April is Poetry Month, and we have David Harrison with us today. I don't think people utilize the libraries nearly as much as they should. Some people do, but I go to the library all the time, and I'm just always surprised to not see, more children there, more grandparents there. And here in Springfield, the Library Center actually has a conference center named after you, which is an honor. And they picked the right person for that. And do you have another book you want to share with us?
Well, you mentioned libraries. Yes, when we do it right, when kids read that very first book all by themselves, it's a magic moment. I still remember mine. I had a stay-at-home mom, so I was very fortunate to have her full attention. I was an only child until I was 15, and then we adopted a little girl. I say we because I was part of that decision. But when I finished that very first book, I was just so proud. And here's a poem I later wrote about my book. I did it. I did it. Come and look at what I've done. I read a book. When someone wrote it long ago for me to read, how did he know that this was the book I'd take from the shelf and lie on the floor and read by myself? I really read it just like that, word by word from first to last. I'm sleeping with this book in bed, this first book I ever read. Now, that poem caught the eye of the wife of the governor of Arizona some years ago. And the Phoenix Suns had just pitched in a lot of money to create an outdoor children's garden at the Burton Barr Library, the main library in Phoenix. And it's an enormous, gorgeous library. So they built this outdoor pavilion for kids. And there's a sidewalk going from the building, the children's department, out into this garden. And they decided they wanted to sandblast this poem into the sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
So they flew me out to Phoenix, and I gave a little talk and read that poem. And it's still there. I've been out a couple of times, and once in a while a friend will take a picture of it and send it to me. And so I have a deep connection in my mind with books and reading and associating it with libraries. And the same poem was picked up in Pueblo, Colorado, and painted on a bookmobile at a library that takes books out into the areas that are not well served by bricks and mortar. They have to take books to the kids. So I'm very, very honored by the way that worked out.
Well, to be an author, you're leaving your fingerprints everywhere, but you're really leaving fingerprints on children's minds, their hearts. It's a legacy that it's hard to explain, to someone who's not a creative. But when you published your first book, I mean, how did that feel? Did it just keep motivating you to want to do it again and again?
Yes, the day the boy with the drum arrived, samples in a box, and I was holding something that had started in my mind, in my head, and I had actually seen that thought translated into a book, and I was thrilled to my toes. We were living in Kansas City at the time, and we had friends from Missouri, from Springfield, come up to help us celebrate. And the book itself, I sold outright. I didn't know at that point about royalty, so it eventually sold 2 million copies. And it was my early education in that I finally figured out that I was probably destined to write for young people. But I was paid $350 for the outright purchase, and never got anything else from it except an education, which meant everything. And so we celebrated, and I took my $350. And of course, bear in mind, that was 1969, so it's worth a little bit more then. I think I looked it up one time, and that would have been the equivalent of maybe a couple thousand or something like that. And so I took my wife Sandy and Larry and Mary Ann Wakefield, and we went out to put on the Ritz. We had lobster dinners at the Savoy, and really did it up right. And my wife bought me a Steubenware Steuben dinosaur, and which I still admire very much, and brings back that first memory. So yeah, that was a red letter day, and it helped me decide to try something else for kids. I didn't bring it, but 3 years later, I won a Christopher Award for the Book of Giant Stories. And I didn't know what that was at the time. I do now, and I can't believe I won one. But We were just leaving Kansas City. I had been the editorial manager at Hallmark Cards at that point. And my father, who had started Glynstone Block Company here in Springfield in 1945, and he wanted to retire. And he wondered if I would be willing to leave Hallmark Cards and come back home and take over the family business. It was just at that juncture that I was notified that I had won the Christopher Award and needed to go to New York City. It was a black tie affair, and receive my medal. And I just couldn't. I had all these things going on, and I didn't have the money to justify, in my mind, flying to New York and so on. So I didn't. And my editor went in my stead and accepted the award and mailed it to me. And she was just chagrined that I didn't show. But anyway, I still have the medal. And again, that came as early as it did as a kind of a proof that I really was following the right path.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you're also a keynote speaker, and you have done over 300 national, regional, and state and local conferences across the country. 300, that's a lot.
Sounds like a lot.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You've been busy.
I've been busy, yeah. So when I say I write 5 days a week, that's not really quite true, because once in a while I have to take off. I was in Salt Lake City not too long ago, and I'm headed later this year to Anaheim. Now, during the pandemic, so many of these personal appearances have been translated into virtual appearances, and so I'm missing people, and I'm so grateful that we're finally getting back into more personal, person-to-person appearances. And but in the meantime, I'm doing all these virtual things and school visits and bookstores, signing, readings, and that's okay. It still gets me there. But I did a school visit earlier this past week, and never saw the kids. They saw me, but boy, it just isn't the same when you don't see those faces out there. And when you write by yourself, you're alone. And I have no trouble with that. I like it. But still, I'm not seeing my audience. I know who they are, but I need once in a while to get out and hear their voices. I want to hear them laugh. I want to hear them ask their own questions. And only then can I stay fresh and stay in touch with the people I write for.
Yes, yes. Well, you have such a heart for kids, and I'm sure that was hard, but I'm sure you blessed so many people in the pandemic that you were able to come on and do the virtual and to give back and know that they were smiling and laughing on the other side there.
Well, I like to imagine that they are, and when we're together, it's just the questions that you get if you write for young people are pretty much universal. I worked in a school in Malaysia one time on the other side of the globe, Kuala Lumpur, and there were 42 languages spoken in that school. It was an international school, and the questions were the same questions I get here. They laughed at the same things. They were curious about the same things, which is a lesson in humanity. But the point being that it isn't that the question, being asked the same question, I guess, tiring, because it comes from different kids, different people, and the opportunity to talk to them about what they want to hear, what they want to learn about writing, about books, about reading, about where ideas come from, how long it takes to make a book. All those are important questions to those individual kids, even though I may have heard it 1,000 times.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that I've got my first book signing. This
Yay!
will be new for me, but May 21st, I'll be at Barnes and Noble, and maybe I can sweet talk you into coming to my book signing. But May 21st at 11 o'clock, and you really, you inspired me with what you said on what you took for your first pay for that, which was a lot of money back then. Someone once told me, because I've sold some books as a ghostwriter. And did I get what I really thought, I should? Who knows? It was my first time, and I had a great mentor who said, Dawn, most people don't get paid for their writing. So the fact that you're getting paid for your writing, is a big deal. And it did motivate me to go ahead and write this book. And so, some things are worth more than money, and they motivate you. And it's obviously motivated you with 109 books that you have written. So would you show them a couple of your other books that you have over there? Because they're just gorgeous.
This one is After Dark, and it's about animals that come out mostly after we go to bed. And there again, that's the biologist in me. And Raccoon Sly, been around, had her share of ups and downs. Light-fingered nighttime thief, dines in style and what you leave. Fading shadow, shaggy streak, vanishes silently up a tree, knows how to pilfer when to climb, an escape artist, one of a kind. And so that's what that book's about. Here's one called Now You See Them, Now You Don't. And it's about the natural camouflage that animals use to hide or to hunt. I didn't bring the cover on this one. It's connecting dots, and it's the story of my life. Up to when I was 65, a long time ago. But I started the first poems in this book about my first memories back when I was 3. And then went all the way up to when I was 65 at the time when I stopped writing it. This is for kids, and yet it covers a 62-year span, which I was fascinated in me as a writer that kids were interested in things that happened to me way beyond their age. It was like they enjoyed the idea of knowing what happened to me as I grew up, because things like that might happen to them.
Yes. Well, this has been just such a joy. Do you have anything that you would like to say to the audience as far as encouraging them to read, to get more into literacy, to go to the library? What final thoughts would you want to give?
Thank you for asking. I just can't emphasize enough the importance of reading, and for all kinds of reasons. And I wouldn't be able to tell you one that you haven't heard before. Just do it. It's so easy to go to the library or to the bookstore or however you borrow a book and get comfortable and settle down and enjoy a tale or a poem or a story or whatever that someone worked a long time, very hard. My average book takes 5 years from the time I think of it to the time it's finally published. And the world is full of fantastic, brilliantly written books. And for us not to take advantage of that, not to learn from other people around the world is a shame. So please do that. And for heaven's sakes, help our kids learn that habit at the earliest possible age, make it fun and interesting and a goal to learn how to read, and they'll take care of the rest of it.
Well, thank you so much, David, for coming on today. It was a true honor and a wonderful pleasure. DavidLHarrison.com. You can follow him on Facebook. He has a blog post every single day talking about writing. So until next time, be the change.
1, 2, 3. Can I get a hoorah from a page?